How many? How many? How many? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All right, what did I get up to?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of How Many, the only podcast that actually counts. Here with Gary Grant and Junior Lopez, and we're missing a couple of our regular co-hosts for this episode. Jesse Jackson and Scott Matula are on strike, holding out for more pay. We will try to negotiate the terms that they are seeking.
Pulling a Danny Bayless.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're doing a Julie Dobbs and Danny Bayless as we speak.
They're tired of Southgate getting a large pizza for medium price.
But the reality is Bob just wanted them off the show completely. He's had enough of their hot takes, and it's taking away from all of Bob's airtime.
Me is me.
He has less people that he has to speak over going forward in this recording session.
No, I'm going to be practicing a lot of self-muting.
I was kind of hoping you were going to add iteration at the end of the self-muting statement.
Oh, mutilation.
The invitation.
So we wanted to do a quick Cowboys episode about the most recent results of the NFL draft, and the Cowboys football schedule for 2022-2023 has been released. So we can kind of go game by game and determine if it's a win or a loss.
Rules are very simple. If you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. But under no circumstances do you ask for the money back. Why not? Because it's not part of the rule.
If we don't want to do that, we can at least give our early predictions to what our record will look like. Gary, you are the, I would say, Cowboys expert of our group. You have your own podcast that specializes in Cowboys along with UK Mark.
How about y'all fix this shit, Rich?
Let's get some early thoughts on what you thought of the draft and the direction that the Cowboys took.
I know the first pick was not a popular one, but now we've at least gone through the first mini camp, which I know is just kind of like the underwear Olympics. They're not in pads out there. But his biggest problem seems to be things like hands placement and keeping his hands and his feet in sync and things like that. In the little time that they've been working with him, the coaches all kind of raved about how good he did and how quickly he had made some of the adjustments that they had asked him to make.
And just to reiterate, they took Tyler Smith out of
Yes.
Tulsa, the offensive tackle, with their first round pick.
You know, you don't expect them to say anything other than that. They're not going to come out and say, wow, we really blew that pick. He sucks. so, I mean, it's all just talk until the pads go on for training camp. Yes, Tyler Smith, I think, has the potential to be a very good starting left guard. He's certainly a mauler in the run game, and that's something we need. Sam Williams, the guy that was taken in the second round, he's an edge rusher. I'm pretty high on him, mostly because Dan Quinn worked him out personally and stood on the table and said, this is my guy. I'm excited about that pick just because Dan Quinn is excited about that pick. I think Jalen Tolbert may be the steal of our draft, the wide receiver that we got in the third round, although Damone Clark may give him some run for that. Jake Ferguson, the tight end, was picked in the fourth round, has looked great in minicamp so far, the way he's moving, running routes and whatnot. They seem to be really happy with him. They think that the fifth round tackle that they took, Matt Waletzko, is already probably in line to be the swing tackle on this team. I'm not sure what that says about either our swing tackles that we have or what they think about him in general. Bob's little cousin, Duran, pick in the fifth round. I can't imagine he's even going to make the team. If he's
Mike with the last name like that.
Yeah, just kind of figure if he's related to Bob at all, there's no way his athleticism holds up at this level.
The Bland curse.
Yeah, Damone Clark is really interesting because this guy was a first-round linebacker. Statistically, even playing in the SEC, he was just as good as any linebacker that was drafted this year. He was a monster at the Senior Bowl. And then they told him in his medicals that he had a herniated disc and he needed spinal fusion.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
which is the same thing that Leighton Vander Esch had last year, and he came back from that fairly quickly. Damone Clark said he never even felt any pain, so he did it because the doctors told him that they needed to do it, but it wasn't causing him any problems, and they think he may actually be back at some point this year.
By the way, the most impressive part of Damone Clark, he almost had to take a job at 7-Eleven,
Got any Blue Oyster Cult?
No, I don't have any Blue Oyster Cult. I ate 34 pairs last time around. Where were you? I was that close to working at 7-Eleven,
Round 5, John Ridgeway, I think, is exactly what this team needs in the middle. That guy is a big monster run stuffer. And then Devin Harper, linebacker in the 6th round, is sort of a special teams guy. We'll see if he develops to anything beyond that. The truth is, I think this was a pretty solid draft. I think that it's got the potential for 2 or 3 guys to be actually really, really good. But I see long-term beyond just this year, probably a minimum of 4 starters out of this draft eventually. Wow. And then, that depends on what happens with Clark and Ridgeway. They're definitely rotational guys, but they could end up starting too. So I'm pretty happy with it overall.
From looking at the grades, and I know grades are extremely deceiving. Nobody really knows how these players are going to pan out. It was kind of all over the board. Some people thought this was a very solid draft. Other people thought it was a big miss, too much reaching, maybe a round or 2 ahead of where some of the players were supposed to go. Tyler Smith, to me, seems a lot like La'el Collins in terms of his aggressiveness and having that mauler mentality when it comes to blocking. I am concerned, like you said, kind of with his mechanics, the way his hand placement is. In some of the clips I saw that were not as flattering, it looks like some of his footwork was bad too. I especially remember one play where he kind of got trucked just because it didn't look like he had a solid base. But if we can get a similar first season out of him that we got out of La'el Collins, because La'el Collins' rookie year, he was awesome. I thought he did definitely have the potential, which he ended up moving over into a tackle position. So I think a lot of things that kind of went off the rails with him were off the field related more than anything. As long as Tyler Smith doesn't have that issue, which in listening to his interviews, it didn't seem like he did, I think he has a good future for us. I remember the last time we took somebody that was supposed to be a guard, it was Zach Martin in the first round. And everybody was kind of upset about that pick. And as we've seen, he's going to probably end up being in the Hall of Fame someday. Yeah. A lot of people were saying the Sam Williams, Jalen Tolbert picks, they both kind of went around outside of where they were supposed to go. But if you flip them, they pretty much went on schedule because Tolbert was projected to be a 2nd rounder, Williams a 3rd. So as long as you got those 2 players in the 2 rounds that you were expecting to get them, I'm cool with it. Jake Ferguson, it seemed like he was one of the lower tight ends that we had on the board in comparison to some of the other ones that were available in the 4th round. I was really hoping they would maybe use some of the 5th round picks that they had, especially the one that we wasted on a Bland, to maybe move up and get some of the more highly touted ones. I mean, I'm okay with Ferguson, and obviously during mini camps and things like that, they're going to say that he looks good. They're obviously not going to say that he looks bad. I'm hopeful that he kind of has the same route that Schultz had, because Schultz kind of came out not really heralded very highly, thought more of as a run blocker. And obviously, as we've seen, he's turned into such a good pass catcher that we've had to use a franchise tag on him just to keep him around, which I'm still hoping that turns into some kind of deal where it's a less amount of money. Gary disagrees, but if we are going to keep him, I don't want to keep him at the franchise tag, but that could end up changing. And then some of the other picks, the Damone Clark pick, I like strictly because he was supposed to be a much higher draft pick, if not for his injury. If we give him a redshirt season, I think he may end up being pretty good because he definitely has a lot of talent. I am kind of leery with drafting injured players, especially injured linebackers, and redshirting them for a year. But his injury is not like Jalen's was, where he basically only had 1 foot to run on. He did have a really good season once he came back from that injury, but then he got too invested in his sunglasses and his apparel and merch deals to really care. I am just really happy for Bob that he is able to now buy a Cowboys jersey, although it will look weird because he's a cornerback. So having Bob walk around with a cornerback number, he definitely needs to have 50s, 60s, 70s is where Bob probably needs to have his number.
Bob needs that well, let's go jersey.
Bob, what did you think of the draft?
Well, you were talking about Damone Clark, and it is somewhat similar to Jalen in that it's a guy who was hurt, but the injury is not as severe, and we took Jalen in the second round. This is a much lower, much safer pick, and it seems like there's a higher ceiling here as well because this guy, not that he's necessarily more talented than Jalen, but the injury is not as bad, and it sounds like once he's good to go, we may have something there. Tyler Smith, you guys have touched on a lot of that stuff already. The thing to me that's most concerning is the number of penalties that he had. But again, that's something you can coach out of a guy. I think he has the raw talent, the raw skills that you want. You can't coach size. You can't coach what some of the things this guy brings. So Lyle's a pretty good comp junior. I think that, maybe he can work out that way. I think Tolbert sounds like Gallup 2.0. It's a third round steal that may be able to pay pretty immediate dividends. That's really exciting. To me, out of the whole draft, Sam Williams is kind of the X factor. It doesn't seem like there's going to be any middle ground with him. He's either going to be unbelievable, like can't believe we got this guy, or 2 years from now, he's not even going to be on the roster. I'm hopeful it's the former, not the latter. And I think it's encouraging. He's an SEC guy, and SEC defenders typically work out in the NFL. So that's promising. You also talked about Jake Ferguson Jr. being not graded as high as some of the other tight ends that were still available. I think there was a guy from Coastal Carolina that was top of the board at that point. We'll have to see. He's got a good pedigree. He's Barry Alvarez's grandkid.
Bill Walton's kid.
He was, I think, all Big Ten or Big Ten tight end of the year or something. But he, yeah,
Big Ten tight end of the year.
Whatever that award is. I think that's the Larry Bird Trophy. All in all, pretty good. Arkansas, maybe that's kind of a Jerry pick there, but I don't know about Ridgeway and Devin Harper, Oklahoma State. Those guys, you just see what you get in late rounds. The fact that we had so many fifth round picks gave us some luxury to really try and see what was out there. But there's a lot of good schools in here, a lot of SEC, a lot of big name schools. So that's good.
Gary, I know that when you guys did your episode about the draft,
How about y'all fix this shit, Rich?
you also touched base on some of the undrafted free agents that we picked up. What were some of the names that stood out to you there?
The first one that I would be really happy about if I were you guys, Marquise Bell. Bell is a long, tall, rangy safety, kind of a Jaron Curse type. I played at a smaller school, Florida A&M. He was projected to actually go, I think, in the 5th or 6th round by most of the draft guides that come out. We got him for free. So Marquise Bell is a big one. There are a couple of wide receivers that I would keep my eye on if I were you. Dontario Drummond and Ty Freifogel. Both are pretty, like they're good height, weight, speed guys that were productive in college. Malik Davis, running back from Florida, maybe. There were several centers. They signed James Empey from BYU. They signed Alex Lindstrom from Boston College. Both of those guys were projected to be drafted. Obviously, neither one was. Both of them are a little bit undersized, which when you're facing some of the defensive tackles that you face in the NFC East is not such a great thing. But I think they're just kind of hoping one of those guys might jump up and grab a spot on the roster. The kicker that I think is the most exciting thing to me maybe is Jonathan Garibay from Texas Tech. That dude had a 64-yard walk-off game winner last year, so he can really, really kick. He's got a big leg. There is a tight end from Indiana named Peyton Hendershot. He had some off-field troubles. We love to get guys who have off-field trouble. And if he's actually not going to be in any trouble, he would have been a much higher prospect had it not been for the off-field stuff. I think he fell quite a bit because of that, but that's a guy that as a receiver, I don't know how much of a blocker he is, but as a receiver, he's a very good tight end. Other than that, a couple of running backs, a couple of linemen that are kind of interesting. Another corner, Isaac Taylor Stewart, was projected to be drafted from Southern Cal. And then there was a safety from Georgia Tech, Wanye Thomas. He's another guy that fits the Dan Quinn mold for safeties. So that's the bulk of them. There are a few more guys than that on the list, but I think I ran down the majority of them.
Yeah, one of the names that intrigued me just because of the nickname was Big Cat Bryant out of UCF. Yeah. Because the last time we had a Big Cat on the team, it worked out pretty well. That was the great Leon Lett.
Unfortunately, I think, according to what Dane Brugler and a few others said about him, Big Cat Leon Lett might still be a better defensive tackle.
Don't fall for it, Big Cat.
Yeah, I think the nickname there might be the most intriguing part of him.
So let's transition over to the Cowboys schedule, which was just released a couple of weeks ago. In looking at some of the games that have been scheduled, we start off the season with a very tough 2 games, but they're both at home. We again start the season off against Tampa Bay, which prior to Tom Brady coming back, we probably could have penciled in as a win with whatever backup they were going to bring in. But unfortunately, Brady rescinded on his retirement and is coming back, which means that they're probably going to be a pretty big contender in the NFC again. And then right after that, we go into the Cincinnati, which is the defending AFC champions, almost won the Super Bowl last year. So it will definitely be a good barometer test for us to see, kind of where we stand against the rest of the league and, potentially how we will do. What were some of the things that kind of stood out to you guys regarding the schedule?
It finishes a lot easier than it starts, that's for sure. They'll have a chance to make a run at the end of the season, depending on how things go in a couple of games. Like Indianapolis doesn't really have a quarterback right now, but they've got a good defense and a good running game. But at the end of the season, after the Green Bay game in November, you're looking at Minnesota, New York, Giants, Indy, Houston, Jacksonville, Philadelphia, Tennessee, and Washington. You've got a pretty good chance to just about run the table there. You can certainly reel off, 6 or 7 wins out of 7, 6 out of 7, 7 out of 8 to close out the season. Yeah,
Tennessee looks like the really tough one there. And depending on how much Philadelphia improves, because they did have a pretty good draft from all accounts. The guy they took in the first round, it looks like he's going to be possibly a plug and play big Fletcher Cox,
big hairy sack
replacement. So, but we'll see. Bob, what did you think of the schedule?
Gary hit on the fact that it is easy after the bye. The bye being right and smack in the middle of the season is good. I think that we're playing the NFC North other than the Packers. That's a spare ass division. So that ought to be pretty beneficial for us. The other thing that's interesting is most years we'll have games somewhat close together with division teams where we'll play the Giants maybe like 3 weeks apart, or the Redskins. They're all spread out. So we don't play any of them close together, which I think that's pretty good. So yeah, it's just a tough start. That first 5-6 weeks in general, you got the Rams week 5 at LA. And none of them are unwinnable, obviously. We've said it before. Cowboys can beat anybody in the league, but they can also lose to anybody in the league. So you just don't know.
Free agency is pretty much over, at least the higher tier free agents. Although obviously there's going to be cuts throughout training camp, throughout preseason, and those could be potential people that we pick up. But just looking, I don't want to do Craig Miller's bit of going game by game, but based on the offseason we've had so far, the draft, the free agency pickups that we have made, and the strength of schedule, what's an early look for our record?
I'll be conservative just to not academy run it, but maybe something on the 11-7 into thing, or 11-6 into things. Or wait, would it be 7? It's 16, 17. Yeah,
17 games. So
yeah, 11-6.
Unless you were counting the wild card loss that we're going to potentially have as the 8th loss.
No, I would say 11-6, maybe 10-7, but mark or 11-6 as my official pick.
And obviously, once we get closer to the beginning of the season, we'll have a follow-up episode where we'll give our true predictions after having analyzed all of the data for our loyal How Many listeners. Gary, what are you thinking so far?
It's funny, but when you've got a franchise quarterback and some decent talent on the team, I think you can just about pencil in somewhere between 10 and 12 wins. I think that's just kind of normal. The division's not very good. Philadelphia's got a lot of good pieces. I think their coaching may be still a little suspect, and their quarterback is suspect, and that plays such a huge role. They haven't really played us tight, but if they start playing us tight, you're going to have a non-franchise quarterback trying to make plays in a tight football game against a pretty salty defense. So I don't know. I still see a lot of wins in the division. And then when I look at the schedule, I see quite a few soft games outside of the division. And when I see all that, I think 11, somewhere between 10 and 12 wins is very realistic, depending on what happens, obviously, with Tampa, Cincinnati, Green Bay, Tennessee. Those are kind of the pivotal games. every other one of the games you almost kind of expect to win, and you feel like you have at least a decent shot even in those. 10 or 11 wins is probably right in the right neighborhood, which I think Vegas has them at 10.5. So
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I think 10 to 12 wins sounds about right. I don't necessarily think that this offseason has improved our roster. I think we've lost a lot of pieces that we really relied on. We have brought in some pieces to kind of replace what we've lost, but I wouldn't necessarily say that our roster has gotten better from last year. But that said, like you were talking about, our division is pretty weak. Philadelphia is really the only team that could potentially contend for the division title. Washington and Giants, I don't really see them contending. And because we're playing a division that really only has Green Bay as its centerpiece, I think we have a good shot to beat the Detroits, the Chicagos, and the Minnesotas of the world. So yeah, 10 to 12 sounds about right.
Let me ask you guys a question. So this is something you kind of touched on it, and I'm just curious. There have been some people that we lost this offseason, and I think probably the ones that everybody points to the most are going to be Amari Cooper and La'el Collins. Now, I know with the La'el Collins thing, he missed so many games last year. We already know, or at least we feel like we have a really good idea of what will happen in his spot because we actually have seen it. Now, the player that's taken his place actually could be better after another strong offseason than he even was last year, and he was pretty solid last year. The one that everybody seems to be the most up in arms about is Amari Cooper. So I'm curious from you two if you've heard the rumblings about how maybe he's not really dedicated or doesn't love the game of football. He kind of disappears at times. And if you think that even though the people that you're replacing them with may not be as talented, if their desire and their love of the game of football might be something that sort of closes the gap just through level of effort and availability.
If you're talking just Cooper, then yeah, for the amount of money he was making, I wasn't really thrilled with his production and his inability to always show up for every big game. It just seemed like he disappeared in some of the bigger games that we had. And there would be other games where he would stat pad and have, 12 catches for 200 yards, and it would make the end of the season stats look a lot better. But in reality, he had maybe 3 or 4 games where he caught between 2 and 5 catches for maybe 60 yards. And when we needed him to catch a big third down, he wasn't there. But when it comes to the people we've lost, with Collins being gone, I understand what you're saying with Terrence Steele being able to cover his position, but I was kind of hoping that we would also replace Connor Williams with somebody that was reliable, that we could plug and play. And Tyler Smith could be that guy, but we don't know. The jury's still out. But in addition to losing Cooper, we also lost Cedric Wilson, which I think was a guy that we were really relying on. Whenever Cooper did disappear, Cedric Wilson seemed to be the guy that was, breaking plays and making some of those tough third down catches when Cooper wasn't around. And he's not here either. We're kind of just hoping that Tolbert, the third rounder we drafted, kind of comes in similar to Gallup did in his rookie season and kind of picks up some of the production. But that's 2 solid wide receivers that we lost out of our rotation. And then on the defensive side, losing Randy Gregory, I know from a numbers standpoint, if you compare his numbers to Torrance Armstrong's, which I guess is what you would consider his replacement, the numbers didn't differ that much, but it just seemed like Gregory had, whenever he was healthy and he was playing, just such a knack to cause havoc in the backfield and to get push. And I don't know that Armstrong is going to be able to consistently do that. I know we brought in Fowler, and he had a good season a couple of years ago under Dan Quinn, but he's kind of an unknown too. So those are the big losses to me.
So now I would agree with you, but I think the thing I'm asking, and I understand the concern, I think all the guys that you mentioned, there are questions about their mindset. Like how much does playing and winning mean to them? I mean, we look at what happened with like even Gregory at the end of the season where you're sitting there in the playoff game and the guy, he won't line up on side and he's getting called for defensive holding penalties in really key moments and things like that. And you just kind of, I don't know. I wanted them to keep him. They wanted to keep him. I'm not saying that they wanted to let him walk, but when the money got to a certain point, I was fine with letting him go. And they were certainly pushing up on that number for me. Now, it turned out that it was contract language that became the barrier, not so much the money. But I'm just from my own perspective, they were already at the limit money-wise for about where I would go with him. He's not DeMarcus Lawrence. He's not some guy that I feel like I have to have. And we've survived so long without him, for so many games without him. I guess I was never that into him. And the truth is, you guys know, when he was drafted 5 years ago or whatever, in the second round, I hated that pick. I hated that pick so much because I didn't see it and I don't see it.
And it took a very long time for it to come to fruition.
I think he's replaceable. We can say that, oh man, he gets pushed, he gets this, he gets that. The truth of the matter is, they know what they're losing in terms of pressures, which is a statistic that sort of signifies the push without sacks. And they know what they're losing in terms of sacks. And I think that they can manufacture that out of the guys that they've got over there. And what will really help is having serious help in the middle, which I think they've addressed. I hope they've addressed. Gallimore, if he's healthy, along with Osa, had a really good rookie year. And then Ridgeway, if he's able to actually plug the nose tackle or zero DT spot, I really feel like they'll have a better job. And then there's always Micah. I mean, as good as he was last year, that was the first year he's ever really rushed a passer. He's going to be even better next year.
Don't forget about Twistin' Hill. Come on, baby.
Come on, baby.
I don't think he even makes it.
Bob, what do you think about the offseason in general and what Gary was saying about losing Cooper?
Well, about Amari, I think that's going to be more short-term pain than long-term pain. I think long-term will be fine there. It's just more Gallup's going to be out for a portion of the start of the season. And, Amari's been kind of a security blanket for Dak for a while. So it's going to be a bit of an adjustment for him. Now kind of transitioned over to CD kind of being his go-to guy. And
I think CD did that last year, but
yeah, it's definitely started going in that direction. I think what I feel good most about the team is I think the defense is going to be even better. Not that they've added much, but like Gary said, Micah is going to be better. Diggs is going to be better. The young guys that have been good are going to be better. They're going to start going from like Pro Bowl guys to all pro guys. I'm a little higher on Fowler than other people might be. I feel like he might be able to fill the Gregory void pretty effectively. I feel like the defense is going to be better. The offense may not be better, but I don't think it's going to be appreciably worse.
Ooh, that's a very good cup of coffee there. It's appreciably better than the last one.
It's what?
Appreciably better.
I'm sorry?
Appreciably better.
Appreciably. Sorry, my bad.
Clearly, pay attention, you fool.
That's my bad. Appreciably better.
Hey, come on.
There's some adjustments they need to make in some of the approach, the calls, some of the things that Kellen's doing. They need to tighten up on some of that stuff, but I think they're going to be good.
Hey, here's something to think about from the defensive standpoint. This will be the first time in a while that we've had two starting safeties returning that people actually like and believe can play in this league. Jaron Curse is back. Everybody loved Curse.
Yeah.
Hooker is also back. And a note on Hooker. So he was 2 years ago, he had the Achilles injury. And so last year was his first year coming back from the Achilles injury, and he was good last year. I'm not saying that he wasn't good, but the Achilles is kind of like what knees used to be like. It's like year one, you can come back and play. Year two, they sort of get the explosiveness back and things like that. Malik Hooker is 26 years old. He just turned 26, and he was the 15th pick in the draft in 2017. I really think that he is an absolute steal for us. And between him and Curse and Diggs and whatever they do at the other corner spots, I feel so good about the secondary, and even better with DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons roaming the middle. So,
and the other thing that we're forgetting about is we're going to have hopefully a full season from Jabril Cox, big Jabril Cox.
Yes.
So what he showed in the little time he was healthy last year was very promising.
Agreed.
Yeah, stacking up those LSU linebackers with him and Damone. And just another note on Hooker. Coming from the world's oldest profession, I have a lot of faith in the Hooker. All right, guys. Well, thank you for helping me recap the Cowboys offseason so far. Again, we will do this as we get closer to the real season once it begins, and we'll do some updated predictions based on some of the changes that have happened to the roster. But for now, if you'd like to give us any feedback, reach out to us at How Many Podcasts on Twitter. Email us howmanypodcasts@gmail.com. You can reach Gary at travel_cowboy. You can also listen to his podcast along with UK Mark, Fix This Shit Rich. That's what, fixthisshit.rich.net.
Fixitrich.net, and the Twitter handle is Fixit-Rich.
How about y'all fix this shit, Rich?
And then Bob, you can reach him at Lukewarm Tallboy or his other 10 podcasts that he's currently a part of. Campfire Songs and Assume the Juxtaposition.
No, just plausible deniability. That's it.
Bend and Scoop.
No, there's no Bend and Scoop.
All right. Well, thank you, listeners, and we will talk to you soon.
Big hairy sack. Big hairy sack.